Hi kids, it is me again, Mr. Wade, and I am excited to be back with you again for week 2 of talking about God of creation. I don't know about you, but God has made everything around here, and it's fun to think about this. Everything that we can see, the trees, the grass, God made it. Everything we can smell, the pretty flowers, the roses that are blooming, God made it. Everything we can taste, that chocolate bar, the bowl of cereal you had this morning, God made all of it. All the things we can hear, birds chirping, the wind blowing, God made all of it. And because God made all of it, we as His people get to explore all of creation and get to have so much fun enjoying the God of creation who has made everything that we can see and everything we can't see. Today, we're going to take a look at what God made on the second day when He took the waters and He created the earth and He brought it all together and created the universe. I am so excited, and I hope you guys come along with me as we learn about how vast and big our God really is. Well, have you ever stood next to something that is really, really big? I'm not talking about standing next to your mom or dad or an adult. I'm talking about standing next to something that is so super big that it's hard to even see the top of it. A giant tree, a huge building. Have you ever walked downtown Omaha and looked up? When you look up at how big these things are, it is easy to feel really small. But then have you ever stood next to something that's really, really small? And I'm not talking about a baby brother or a baby sister. I'm talking about maybe an ant that's on your driveway. I'm talking about maybe a fly that lands on the ground. Have you ever stood next to something that is so small that you feel like you could just step on it with your foot and it would be gone? It also makes us feel so big. And see, those feelings are so fun for us because they remind us that God is the God of the big things, the trees and the clouds and everything that is so high above us. But He's also God of all the small things. And when we look at the small things, we remember that God is controlling the movement of every ant. He's controlling yes, even spiders. He's controlling all of it. And that makes us so excited. And so this is why we get so excited about creation, especially when we talk about how big all of creation is, because we get to look at the small things and the big things. I want you to listen to this. King David, when he's thinking about how good God is and how God saves him and saves him from all the bad things that he's done, King David starts talking about that. But in Psalm 65, King David all of a sudden just stops and starts saying how great God is because of all the things that He's done. Listen to the words that King David uses in Psalm 65. He says, "You answer us with awe-inspiring works. You are the God of our salvation. You save us, and you're the hope of all of the ends of the earth. From the tiniest things to the biggest things, to the farthest seas, you have established all of the mountains. You built them, God, with your power, and that you silence the roar of the seas." Think of the big waves that are out there. God is the one doing this, and He has done it from the east to the west. He visits the earth and brings water on the earth. His stream is filled with water. He provides grain on the earth. He softens the earth with showers. He blesses its growth. He soaks all of the earth. The wilderness overflows. The hills are robed with joy. There are things in abundance across this earth. The pastures have flocks. The valleys are covered with grain, and they all shout in triumph. Indeed, they sing. David is talking about how much God has saved him. But then he just spontaneously, without anything else, just jumps into praising God for the things He has done and the things that He has created. This is what we call awe-inspiring. It's where we get the word awesome. When we think about God, the God of the big things and the God of the small things, we want to respond by saying, "God, how awesome are you?" So let's get started by looking at some really, really small things, starting with some chemistry. I've got my friend here, Mr. Travis, and he is going to help me with this experiment. So what we've got set up here is a couple jars of water. And the reason we're starting with chemistry when we talk about things super small is I don't know if you've ever heard of something called an atom. But 350 years ago, we had no clue that these things called atoms existed. Atoms are super, 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 super small. You can't see it with your eye. You can't see it with a microscope. You have to use really, really, really special techniques. And unfortunately, we don't have those techniques to be able to see it. So we're going to watch what happens with the atoms with things that we can see. So I want to show you what atoms actually are and kind of what they do. I've got two little magnets here, magnet tiles. You probably have them at home. And what they do is, let's take table salt, for instance. Just regular salt. You probably have this at home too. Now, table salt is not an atom itself. But what it is it's a little bit of sodium, called a sodium atom, a little bit of chlorine, called a chlorine atom, and they stick together really tight. And when they stick together really tight, you got table salt. Now, when you drop it in a cup of water, the table salt starts to break apart, and when you taste it, you taste sodium, and you realize, hey, this is salty, because your tongue is tasting sodium atoms and saying, it's salty. And so these atoms are super small, but we use them in all incredible ways. Everything we see is made up of an atom. Our bodies, made up of atoms. These cups, made up of atoms. The air we breathe, made up of atoms. So we're going to watch what happens when these atoms move around. And so we've got this first cup where it's just water in there. And we're going to mix a little bit of vitamin C in that and see what happens. So right now we've got vitamin C in water. And guess what? Nothing has happened. It is exactly the same as it was. It's just vitamin C in water. The atoms aren't really moving around yet. They're just staying separate. Water atoms, and there's some vitamin C in there as well. But now we're going to do something different. So we are going to take a teaspoon of this, and we're going to put it into this second cup. This second cup also has water in it. So again, nothing is happening yet. It's just vitamin C inside some water. But we're going to mix a little bit of this in. We're going to mix another teaspoon of this. It's called iodine. You can notice it's really, really brown, but let's see what happens when we put it in the water. Do you think it's going to stay brown? Maybe not as brown as you thought. It starts to get a little bit clearer, doesn't it? What about when he mixes it? See, all those atoms in the iodine are starting to break apart a little bit, and they're starting to form different compounds inside there, and it's changed so that now the water is clear. And you can still see a little bit of iodine on the side, but if we were to mix the water in that, it's all going to disappear too. Now, this is when the fun starts. I know, you probably thought this was fun. We're going to get to the real fun part. And so we're going to set this aside right now. Mr. Travis is going to take this cup of water, and we are going to put a tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide in it. Now, hydrogen peroxide is something that you just put on if you get a scrape or a cut. It helps your cut to feel better, and it kind of bubbles too. That's another fun thing. This is liquid starch. It goes in your laundry. It helps you when you're ironing your shirts. And we're going to put a half teaspoon of this, just a little bit of starch in, or a lot starch in. Either way, the science is still going to work. So now we're going to mix that up really good, and let's get ready to see what's going to happen. So remember, nothing's really happened at this point. We've got some hydrogen peroxide and some starch in water. Nothing's really happening. But when we get ready to mix these two cups together, when we have the iodine and the starch coming together, I want you to see what happens. Atoms that were previously together like this are going to separate apart, and they're going to join with other atoms, and we're going to actually watch as they move. Now, I want to tell you what you're going to see. You're going to see the color change, because these atoms are moving to create new chemicals, and those new chemicals have new colors. And so let's see what's going to happen. So Mr. Travis, could you mix those together for us? Look at that. Wasn't that cool? How fast it changed. And all of that happened because atoms were moving around inside this water. And they were together like this, but they split apart. And they moved and they attached to other atoms. And you can see that because the color changed. Isn't that so cool? We can't see these atoms ourselves, but we can see what happens when they move around. Let's go take another look at something really, really small. So I've got two things of water right here. And it's probably difficult for you to tell apart which is which and why they're different, but they are definitely different. This one in the cup, this is just normal water straight out of your faucet. You can drink it, you have no problems. But this is water I grabbed out of a local pond. It looks clear, it looks like you could pick it up and drink it, but you definitely don't want to. The reason we filter our water before we drink it is because this water is full of small little tiny bugs and bacteria. Bacteria, algae, paramecium, which are like little animals that swim around. amoeba, which are like little blobs that swim around. If you drink this water, you will get sick, even though it looks exactly the same. So let's take a look at what actually is going on in this water and see if we can see any of those super small things. Do you see how they're moving around? They don't have eyes. They don't see where they're going. What they do instead is they've got almost like a nose. It's not really a nose, but it's kind of like that. You know when your mom or your dad bakes some yummy food and you can smell it and you start to know exactly what they're baking? Oh, those are cookies. Ooh, that's fresh bread. You smell it and you know where it's coming from and you start to walk around. See, the little bugs that we're looking at here, these paramecium, these amoeba, they're doing the exact same thing. Somewhere out there in the water, they smell something that they think tastes really good. And so they try to find where it's at. But they don't go straight to it. Have you ever played the hot and cold game where you say, you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer, oh, you're really hot, and then you turn and walk somewhere else? Oh, no, you're cold again. It helps you find objects, right? Maybe it's a game you've played before. It's kind of like what these paramecium and amoeba are doing. They're playing the hot and cold game. They walk towards something, and their nose is telling them, are they hot or are they cold? Are they getting closer to the thing that they think tastes really yummy, or are they getting farther away? And when they get closer, they try to walk towards it. And then they make a turn, and they walk away, and their nose says, nope, you're getting colder, and they turn. That's what we see is happening here. They're trying to find the food that they want to eat. So we can see even at the small level of these paramecium and these amoeba, we could see that God is still controlling them, that He has given them good things in the water for them to eat, and that they are able to find that and they are able to live because of what God has given them. And just like God was controlling those atoms, and He made those atoms remix so that they could form into new substances that make blue color just for you, God is taking care of these paramecium. See, God is caring about all of this. In Matthew, Jesus tells us that if God cares so much for the flowers in the field and the birds in the air, how much more does He care for us? But kids, I want to say something else. Jesus didn't say if God cares so much for the paramecium, but I think we can go ahead and we can think that as well. Because if God is in control of even the tiny, tiny, tiny things, and if He cares about them enough to give them the food they need to get through their days, how much more does God care about us? And it's important for us to think about things that are super small because in Psalm 139, David talks about everywhere he goes, that God is there. If he goes high to the heavens, God is there. If he goes to the deepest part of the oceans, God is there. If we look at small atoms that are changing around and making new colors, God is there. If we look at paramecium and amoeba that are moving around trying to find their food, God is there. Let's go look at something else that's, well, it's a little bit bigger. And let's see how God is at work in all of His creation. We saw some really, really small things, but now we want to take a look at what God has done that is so big. So you guys probably already know that we've got a bunch of planets in our solar system. And our solar system seems so big because it is so big. But I don't know if you really understand how big and vast and huge our solar system is. And so we've got on the ground here a little example. And when you look at each one of these little rolls of toilet paper, that is how far away these planets are from the sun. So if I am the sun right here, we've got really close planets like Mercury. But then we've got planets that are a little further away like the Earth right here. And then we go even farther to Jupiter and Saturn. And then if you can see Mr. Travis all the way down there, we've got Neptune. Look how far away it is. We almost didn't have room in the gym to put how far away it is. And yet Earth, where we live, where God has put people in His own image, it is just this close. Guys, when we think about the universe, about how big and huge the universe is, remember that this is just our solar system. These are just the planets around our sun, one star. Now, guys, when you go out into the night sky and you take a look at all of the stars in the sky, scientists think that we could see about 5,000 stars. That's a lot of stars. But When they look around the entire universe, they think that there are closer to a septillion amount of stars. That is 1 followed by 24 zeros. There are so many stars that we in our lifetimes would never, ever be able to count them, let alone know anything about them. But the Bible reminds us that God is upholding all of them by the power of His Word and His mighty right hand. In your packets here that you get to take home, your bags have something in here that helps you look at the night sky. And you can look up at the stars and see different designs that God has put in there. Designs that He made just for us. Designs like Orion. Designs like Pleiades. Designs like the bear. These are all things that Job, when he was talking about what God has done, he looked up in the sky and he said, God has created Orion, the bear, and Pleiades. You'll see these in your packets. And so when you go out into that night sky and you look at how vast the universe really is, remember, you're seeing just a little part. Our solar system here is huge, but the universe, the one that God created, is so much bigger. Guys, that was so big. We looked at that toilet paper rolled out everywhere. It almost filled the entire gym, and that helped us to see how big our solar system is. And then we think about how big the universe is compared to that. Billions and billions and billions of stars thrown out into the galaxy by God Himself with His own hand. Guys, I want to kind of contrast how big and small these things are. So I've got a ruler here. And if you look really closely at this ruler, or most of your rulers, you'll see these really small numbers at the top. But what you might not notice is that in between these small numbers are even smaller lines. Each of those lines is what we call a millimeter. When we think about these millimeters, and we think about the bacteria, the amoeba, the things that we looked at when we were looking at that pond water, if you took one of those super, super, super small lines and you divided it into 100 pieces, that's about how big one of those amoeba are that we were looking at. But those atoms we were looking at, you take one of these small lines right here, and you have to divide it 100,000 times into little pieces. Those atoms are only about that big. Now let's think about the biggest things. We can't use a ruler for this. We actually have to use light, the fastest thing we know about. The farthest stars that we have been able to see and think about, the farthest one, scientists say the light from that star would take 5 billion years to get to Earth. That's crazy. That's not take a ruler and try to divide it up into small pieces. This is 5 billion years for the light just to get here. That is so far away. It amazes us, and it amazes me because God is the God of these small things, but also the God of this massive universe. It is so exciting for us to see all of this, and we are in awe of what God does. Job reminded us in chapter 9 that he looks out at creation and he sees the stars in the sky and he sees those constellations that you can look at, and he remembers God. Guys, there is so much in this universe for us to explore. There is so much that we get to figure out about God and His character and what He is doing already. Things that we have not found yet. Scientists say that there are still about 5 million plants and animals on our Earth right here that are not even discovered yet. Things that you can discover, things that you can describe, things that you would be the first one to really talk about, things that God Himself is the only one who knows right now. And what's even more, last year was the first year that we have actually, as humans, went down to the deepest part of the ocean. We had never been there before, but God had created it. Since the beginning of the world, He formed it, and it was there. And now, so long later, we have finally seen it with our own eyes. Guys, God has done all of this to amaze us, to make us remember that He is truly awesome, that we are in awe of the things He does. But also He does this to remind us that He is God of creation, of all the created things, and He cares so much about all of those, and He is in control of all of those, but at the same time, He has made us in His image. And because He has made us people in his image, we can take trust in the fact that he loves us. He knows us. The Bible reminds us that he does not let a hair fall off of our head without it being something that he wants to happen. God is in control of the universe around us, big and small, and yet he loves us. He is close to us, and that should amaze us. That should leave us in awe of him. And so we pray that when you go out into the dark tonight and you stare up at the night sky, that you are amazed by the big things out there. That when you stand next to something so small, that you are in awe of how big you are compared to what is so small next to you. And we pray that as you are in awe of those things, that your mind is drawn to God, to what he is doing in the world around you. He is the God of creation. We'll see you next week for another video.